Good evening, folks. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to address the awkward elephant in the room. Yes, I'm dressed as a Mexican Day of the Dead suit. This is my Halloween outfit this weekend. It's also because directly after this event, I'm doing another event that is Halloween themed, and I don't have time to change between them. So you're stuck with me wearing this. Thank you for that kind introduction there, Mindy. This is my second time at Expert Agile Club, so great to be here again. My previous talk was around the Agile Manifesto need to change my mind. So I've got a bit of a thematic way of doing things. I like the idea of it being an interactive debate more than just me talking at you for a while. If you navigate your way to the Zoom chat, you'll see a Miro link. If you jump on that, that is where we're going to be doing the magic today. And as Mindy mentioned, the topic I'm going to be talking about is people are not resources. Change my mind. Something I'm very much a firm believer in. I describe myself as a people first agile coach. And the reason I came to that description was actually I was talking with another coach and they said, well, I'm a full stack agile coach. And I said, well, hey, what does that mean? They said, well, I'm a bit people focused. I'm a bit technical. I do some of the traditional business agility stuff. And I thought, okay, well, if you're a full stack coach, I'm definitely more of a people focused coach. My aim when it comes to the sort of work I do is to try and provide an environment where people can be their best selves on their best day, and be supported on their worst day, to systemically try and improve the environment so that they can be as productive as possible. And being people first is right down to the core of that, to the point that I have a little logo and stickers being people first, Guardians of Agility, and my team of champions. So yes, great to speak to you today. I'm sharing once more the Miro link for anyone who hasn't seen it. It should be in the chat. And I'm going to share my screen as well so that those who can't find their way there will be seeing what I'm seeing. Now, humans aren't resources. This is really an interesting one for me. Humans as resources has become this ingrained bit of business language. And I can't think how. Well, I think I know how, but I can't think why it's still relevant today. To the point where, think of this poem here, and I'll read it out. It describes some of those really commonly used bits of business language. They're a bit buzzwordy, and resources, humans as resources, is kind of like one of them. So it says, reach out to me, reach out, you'll find my calendar is up to date. Let's get together and move the needle, although I have a hard stop at 8. A bit like Jana was saying, she's got a hard stop at the bottom of the hour. Drill down with me under the spreadsheet, we shall dive. Once there, we can sample low-hanging fruits whilst we innovate and synergize. Align with me, align, explore the many moving parts. It's fine to think outside the box if we capture it all on your flip charts. Deploy with me, deploy those assets which are quite considerable. So let's leverage them along the way as we focus on our core deliverable. Humans as resources seems to be one of those bits of ingrained language that we use often without realizing we're doing it. We don't tend to mean anything by it, but it just seems to happen. Now, you've learned a little bit about me, folks. I think it'd be great to learn a little bit about you. So there is a link here to Menti. I would love for you to follow that. You can also follow the QR code, and I will post it in the chat as well. Do you want to ask you a couple of questions before we start? So you will find your way on a Menti link. There are about 4 questions, and the very first one of all is, what is the first thing that springs to mind when I say humans are not resources? And once you guys navigate your way there, we'll start to see some of these responses coming through in a bit of a word cloud view. Is everyone able to see and access that Menti?
Chris, we're not able to see the Miro board on our thing right now.
That's because I switched to the Menti screen. That's why.
Okay, we're just seeing that you started sharing your screen on my end.
But you can't see anything that I'm seeing.
No.
How very strange.
Yeah.
Let me stop that and restart it. Hold on. Seems to be misbehaving. We might have some tech issues. Can you still see and hear me?
Yes, I can see and hear you.
Just checking. Yeah, my Zoom seems to have frozen a little bit, and now it's crashing. Can you still see and hear and see me?
Yes, we can see and hear you still.
All right, very, very odd. Basically, my screen is almost frozen and I can't navigate my way back to seeing you guys. So I might have to restart my device or restart the Zoom. Otherwise, I can't navigate back and forth, especially if you can't see what I'm sharing. One moment, I'll be back.
Well, Chris is doing that. That will give you a chance to get the Miro up and answer his question and also look at the poll question.
Right, am I back? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you and see you now again.
Magic. Right, let's try this screen share once more. See if we can get you seeing what you should be seeing. How's this?
Yes,
That's
now
good.
we can. Good.
Huzzah.
Hooray.
Technology is wonderful. Okay, we had gone over to Menti. I'm not sure if anyone was able to navigate their way there, but we'll skip that for now. What I was intending to do was just to find a little bit about you folks, what your roles were, what kind of industries you're involved in, and then to get you in a choose your own adventure style to prioritize the themes you're most keen to discuss in a prioritized order with regards to the topic of humans and peoples not being resources. But what I'll do is I'll start with history, the history of humans being referred to as resources, and then you can help me choose the next topic accordingly from there. So I'm going to zoom in here. And again, I'm going to share the link to the Miro board once more in the chat so that you can navigate your way here. I can see there are 7 people on the Miro board so far. So can anyone tell me in this top left-hand corner here, what are we seeing? Does anyone recognize this image? You can type in the chat, you can speak aloud. Any thoughts?
Would this be one of the first automobiles, perhaps a Ford automobile assembly line?
It is the first assembly line, the Ford automobile assembly line. So if we go right back to the early 1900s, this was how work was typically done. It was all very manual, and the focus was absolutely on how can we automate and get as much possible productivity out of a person in a time frame? How can we maximize the amount of output someone can do in the hours they're working? And we then have things like, anyone familiar with McGregor, theory X and Y management styles? So we've got this, if you are a theory X manager, you believe that everyone dislikes work and you'll actively avoid it if you can. We have to force people to do things in the right way, that people would rather be directed and told what to do than accept any responsibility to do things themselves, that they're primarily motivated by money and they have fears about job security. And actually, a lot of people don't have creativity, except when it comes to bending the rules. That was the traditional way of doing things. Whereas theory Y believes that actually we want to work, we need to, we take an interest in it, and under the right conditions, we can really enjoy it. That we want to direct ourselves, be autonomous, and we know agility and autonomy go very hand in hand. That we will seek responsibility, we'll seek greater responsibility, we'll seek promotion, and under the right conditions, we'd like to do that. We're motivated to realize the potential that we have. And actually, we're really highly creative creatures, but are rarely recognized and such and given the opportunity to do so. So we've got these very archaic management styles. We've then got Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which I'm sure some of you would have seen the meme image of in the last few years, where right at the bottom beneath physiological needs, Wi-Fi has been added as a layer. But this hierarchy of needs suggests once you've got your very basic needs met, the safety needs around kind of physiology, your food, your water, your rest, then you start to think about safety before going to belongingness. And towards the top, we have this actualization, this desire to achieve our potential and do creative things. One of my favorite books and one of the things that underpin agility for me is Dan Pink's theories around motivation and what's surprising. Purpose. Is anyone familiar with that book?
Yes.
Yeah, great one. I've got it on my shelf just over there. It's a book called Drive. Not that I'm promoting Mr. Dan Pink, but to him, and the way he describes motivation is that people want autonomy to work self-directed, to be given a problem to solve, an outcome to deliver to, rather than being told exactly what to do. There's a reason why there are charities out there, there are companies like Wikipedia that are creating and people voluntarily adding great things. You know, there are great products, Linux and things like that, Git, all the various Git repositories. People are contributing their own efforts, their own time, not to monetize things, but because they are inspired by the ability to work in a self-directed way. They have a purpose because they're focused on trying to help people and actually want to continually master new skills. Now, interestingly, we did a bit of research. The word resources, if you look in Google, the NBooks viewer, you can search how often words appear in literature. And the frequency that words is, the word resources is appearing in literature is declining over time. So since 1990, agility, obviously, the Agile Manifesto came out in 2001, which talks about building projects around motivated individuals. We get to 2018, and that's when you can last capture data right now. The word resources is drastically being reduced. So there's a lot of theory, there's a lot of psychological research, business research around what motivates people and around the word resources being used. And a lot of it, a lot of the terminology, the fact that it's become baked into the way we do things. When we prepare new projects, people are saying, oh, what resources do we need for it? And actually what they mean is people. And it's quite frustrating. So here's a question for you folks, and I'd like you to answer on the Miro board if you can, but you can also, if you prefer to do so, speak aloud, type in the chat. What is it that motivates you about work? Anyone who hasn't used Miro before, if you double left click on any of the post-it notes, you can type inside them. Just make sure that the left hand, the cursor on the left hand nav panel is selected and highlighted in blue, or you can press V on your keyboard. So we can see some answers appearing. Some people are motivated by money, and that's perfectly okay. Some people by learning, the opportunity to be challenged, to innovate, to help people, to gain experience. There's lots of reasons why people work, and not all of them are relating to just being used as a resource, just being thought of as someone who achieves an output, who delivers an output, who is constantly working on productively churning stuff out. Does churning stuff out equal value? Arguably not. New experiences, learning, solving complex problems. And again, I think increasingly what we'll observe is that we're working on a lot of complex problems, particularly if you're a knowledge worker. We're working on complex problems that we don't always have the answers to up front. So the ability to have creative license to work autonomously on how to solve those problems can be very freeing. Adventures, yeah, I definitely work because of the opportunity to go and travel to foreign lands when I get them. So we've talked a little bit about the history of why humans are referred to as resources. It comes systemically from an environment where we were trying to be as productive as possible with the time frame we have. But we've learned nowadays that just because you add more people to the equation and more hours, it doesn't necessarily always mean more output, particularly with knowledge work. The remaining topics we have are human resources, the oxymoron, the dehumanization dilemma. What are the alternatives and what does the industry say? I will allow anyone at random to choose one and we'll go there next. First one to speak.
Dehumanization dilemma.
All right, let's go right into there. So bringing your attention to here, abstraction. And I think Mindy alluded to this in the introduction. If we refer to people as resources, we're dehumanizing them. We're not thinking of them as people. And there's a bit more about this on human resources and oxymoron. But what do we recognize about the top left-hand corner here? What does this look like?
A matrix.
Yeah, it's a matrix. It's lines on a spreadsheet. It looks a bit Gantt chart-like. This is often, or has been often, how projects are planned. And what it does is it pulls people back to just being a line on a spreadsheet, a line on a Gantt chart, something to be disposed of if necessary. We've got too many of those. We don't need those anymore. So we've got resource 7, 8, 9, 10. This is a lot of how projects have been planned. It's a lot of how headcount is planned. They've just become lines on a spreadsheet because people are thought of as resources. How many people have been working at a company and they've heard someone say, well, our people are our greatest asset? Who's heard that before?
I've heard it before.
Yeah. I'm certain lots of people have had it before, because it's just one of those lip service responses that many companies say, but then they don't often back it up with action, with demonstrations that actually people are our assets. What happens when you think of people as assets to be sweated is that they end up being burnt out, worked longer and longer hours. If we look at just some of the visuals below here, this is a bit of a visual depicting how many lines of connection there are between people working in teams. If you've got a 3-person team, it's quite simple, all the way up to a 14-person team. The more people there are in a company, the more it can be that you just feel like a number, because there's just so many people involved, and it can make it easier for people that have to make those difficult decisions to make those decisions, because if they're thinking of them as less than people, it's easier to make, to do that, because it can be quite emotive. So one of the things I'd love to ask you is what metrics do we track in the workplace today? What are you personally, what are you measured upon? What metrics do we track with our teams? Why don't you share your thoughts again via Miro, speak aloud, however you prefer to do so. So I can see hours worked. Yeah, very common one. How many hours are we working? Obviously, many people have contracts, number of hours in a day. The number of stories delivered. Does the number of stories delivered always mean value being delivered? Arguably not. Attendance, yeah. Performance management. Have you met your goals? Happiness score. Okay, I like that someone's added something to do with actually how people are personally feeling. NPS, yeah, team happiness. Usually team happiness is kind of an ENPS, employee net promoter score, with NPS being customer net promoter score. And yeah, attendance, you're tracked on how many days you're well and aren't. Often there are metrics tracking how much you're utilized. If you are in a consultancy, it's the number of days you are billable to a client. The reason I've asked this is often what happens when I ask this is that so many of the things that we're tracked on aren't actually related to treating people like people. They're often hours worked, productivity, stories delivered, velocity, etc., burn down, all of these delightful things, but very few of them actually focus on how enjoyable our experience is, how we are feeling as people. And the consequence of dehumanization and treating people like statistics, and there's a great quote here by Stalin, not that I like to refer to Stalin, but a single death is a tragedy, a million is a statistic. So as soon as we start to refer to people as lines on a spreadsheet, as resources, that is dehumanizing behavior. It makes it easy to think of them as less than. Now, I think that makes sense, just thematically, to come on to human resources and oxymoron. So the description here of human is of or relating to the characteristic of humankind. Now, what do you all think of when you think of resources? What comes to mind? And the description here is a stock or supply of money, materials, staff, or other assets that can be drawn on by a person or organization to function effectively. What are the things that come to mind to you when you think of a resource? And again, feel free to speak out loud, type in the chat, call with me, whatever you feel. Food, water, shelter, okay. What about in a business context? I suppose coffee. Things that I use, that's a good way of thinking of it. Pens, paper, computers, yeah. I'm going to delete this and you'll see resources, yeah, gas, oil, energy, servers, money, coffee.
I'm good, thank you. How are you doing?
Pens, paper, printers, desks, chairs.
I can speak.
I think someone needs to be on mute. There we go. All right. And the next question then, so what would you consider are the traits of a person versus what are the traits of a resource? Feel free to share your thoughts on the Miro boards, or again, out loud or in the Zoom chat. What are the traits of people versus what are the traits of a resource? Love that word. A resource is inanimate. This is a pen, it's inanimate. Yeah, people are changing. They're not immutable. They have emotions, they're motivated. People are complex completely, whereas resources are static. People have empathy, yeah. So we've got lots of differing traits emerging about the differences between people and resources. So let's see then. People, I've written here, people are complex and diverse. They have individual needs. One person's output may differ from another, whereas a fixed unit of a resource is a fixed unit of a resource. A kilowatt of energy is a kilowatt of energy, whereas one developer may produce a different rate to another developer, depending on their experience, their skills, their motivation, their mood, their energy levels, all manner of things. People are problem-solving wizards. I love that description there. They are mutable, so they can change. They are collaborative. They have a lot of potential. Their value can change over time. Well, I guess you could argue resources can as well, but their knowledge changes over time, and they are purpose-driven. And then resources are disposable. They can be replaced. The same output, so a ton of coal will produce the same amount of energy each time. Obviously, there might be some very minor variations on that, depending on I guess weather conditions and things, but for the most part, it's the same. Resources are commodities. They are a means to an end. They are inanimate, someone wrote that down, and they are immutable. They do not change usually. And they're fungible, yes. So I wanted to use that to highlight the differences between people and resources. Now, Admiral Grace Hopper, she told the Pentagon in 1983, you manage things, you lead people. And that's one of the most powerful messages I would love people to take away. Things are managed. You manage things. Scrum itself, the 2020 Scrum Guide replaces some of the terminology and move towards self-managing teams. We have leaders that are here to inspire people, to lead people, not to manage them. You manage things, you lead people. Is anyone familiar with the Pygmalion effect or the self-fulfilling prophecy?
Yes.
Yeah. So this old story, this mythological tale of a sculptor who fell in love with his creation and wished for it to come to life. The same can be true of people and their interactions. So if we treat people like their resources, they may begin to believe that they're less than, that they're just, if they're treated in such a way, they'll start to believe that about themselves, and then they'll begin to behave accordingly. So if someone wakes up every day and just feels like a Jira ticket machine, churning stories through the system without having a sense of purpose, without having a feeling that they're part of something, that they are a person who is responsible for great things and is part of a wider belief system, then they'll probably start behaving like a resource. So I'm a firm believer that we should treat people in the same way we wish to be treated, and that we can be in a situation where we create a self-fulfilling prophecy by continuously referring to people as resources. Any thoughts there from anyone? Very true, Susan, thank you. Right on, Janelle.
I think you see this in surveys as well, when you're asking a group, sometimes if there's negativity, it's again, not bad people, but they've been made to feel like they don't matter in this. They don't have the purpose. They haven't heard vision enough or whatever, or people have been let go. All of those things tend to show up that way. That's where I've seen it.
Absolutely. And it just happens all the time because it's such common language, common business language, just like the word deadline. Deadline has made its way into the business language. A deadline was the line outside of a prison by which if someone went past it, they would be shot. I don't know how that made it into business language, but it has. But the same is true of resources. It's just this, it feels like this dirty word. And I think the real important thing to emphasize is that it doesn't matter if you call someone a resource, as long as you don't treat them as one. There's a very big difference. So if you're referring to a resource and everyone's happy to be referred to as such, and they don't take any offense by it, they don't feel less than as a consequence, and people are actually treated like people, that they're valued, then it doesn't really matter, arguably so. But what are the alternatives, I hear you ask? Well, there are a lot of big companies out there that have begun altering what they call their people departments. So human resources is a function within many, many businesses designed to hopefully onboard and provide a great experience for employees, but often they're there to protect the businesses as well. But there are a lot of companies that have began altering the language they use. So Facebook, for example, refer to their team as people at. Airbnb, employee experiences. Google, people operations. Monzo, the people team. Salesforce, employee success, which I particularly like because it's all about setting their people up for success. We've then begun to see a number of roles appear, becoming more and more common across LinkedIn, across the wider business spectrum. You've got roles appearing such as chief people officer, head of people, chief happiness officer, which I think is delightful, director of employee engagement, people champion, chief purpose officer, people and capability director. Some really great names that are starting to appear as a counter to the traditional human resources, which, as we've reflected on, is a bit of an oxymoron, because we've got humans as unique, complex individuals, whereas resources are these disposable, replaceable commodities. So here's a question for you. I would like you to share examples of perhaps HR departments. Maybe you've heard interesting names of those. Maybe some roles that you've heard of that you think are good and bad. Any examples, any stories to tell? I've heard of, for example, human capital management, which just sounds like consultant speak to me. I'm in consulting. And I think human capital management sounds worse than human resources, if I'm honest. Collaborators sounds good. Anything in with Rockstar in the title. Yeah, I think if we genuinely employed people that were rock stars, would they not turn up to meetings like hungover, looking for their next fix or something? They wouldn't be very productive. All right, so there are a few examples that have come through of some different roles we've had. But what I wanted to emphasize through sharing these alternative examples is that it's happening. There is a growing movement from some of the largest companies in the world for moving away from language that refers to people as resources. And if there was one thing that I could leave anyone with from attending this talk, from being involved with it, is that maybe we should be thinking differently. Perhaps next time you hear yourself or you hear someone refer to someone as a resource, perhaps challenge yourself to think otherwise. The Miro board, Natalie, is on its way. Voila. Should be with you now. We are about midway through, Natalie. We've reflected on the alternatives to calling people resources, how human resources is a bit of an oxymoron in itself, and some of the traits between people and resources, the self-fulfilling prophecy elements where people being treated as resources will become to behave as such. And we've done a bit of the history. But what does the industry say? So a few examples from some notable people out in the agile industry in particular. So people become more valuable over time. Show me a desk that does that. Joanna Rothman. I was speaking with Tobias Mayer not too long ago on my podcast, and he said, if you flip the language ever so slightly and don't call someone a human resource, but call them a resourceful human, it's exactly the same words, but with a slightly different emphasis. You're referring to someone who is resourceful, who is valuable, a human that likes to be resourceful, and that you can be a resource to someone. But it's not the words themselves that matter. Again, it's the context and the language that you use and the behavior that follows. There are some companies out there such as Monzo. Monzo doesn't use the word resources to refer to people because they believe that this business speak is some catch-all term, and it could usually be referring to budget and tools and things like that. But people are people. They're not resources. Nobody likes to be thought of as just a resource. So they don't encourage that. And from day one, they have their own language. They use Monzonauts, but they encourage everyone to correct each other if they hear that language creeping in. And I think that's just wonderful. And that was a post on LinkedIn that was written by a person, not a resource. You've got a company called The Ralph. They don't have a traditional HR department because, again, people are humans and not resources. So they got rid of that and they had a humans, not resources department, H&R. And they championed that shift of focus towards humanizing their processes to think of people as people. I think there's a great one here from one of the Forbes Council members. He said that to be successful in our modern society, we must see as being people as in control of the toolbox rather than being the toolbox. And that being the foundation of a people first approach. They are in control of their situation, their environment. They're not the toolbox. They're not a means to an end. They are people. And then the last thing, Ben Linders, he says, plans are nothing. People are everything. Yeah, a plan is nothing without people. So again, I'd love to hear from you folks. What have you heard out in the working world? Do you have any stories to tell about people being referred to as resources or anything else? You don't need to share the client, the company, if you should wish. Just wondering if you have anything anecdotally to share. You can do so again via the chat, via the Miro board, however you should so wish. Yes, there's an example here, someone's writing their manager called people resources. And the question I have to that person is, how does it make you feel when you're referred to as a resource? If you don't mind sharing, of course, it's up to you.
For me, it rolls off my back, but hearing other people, especially my team, being called resources, because I know there's so much more than that, it just hurts. So I haven't corrected that person, but I do make a point to say people while that person says resources.
And I do the same. I hear it day in, day out. It comes from planning projects. It comes from people talking about, the next opportunity in the pipeline and what resources we need for it. And I'm always thinking, oh no, why are they doing that? And again, I don't believe there is malice behind it. Don't attribute to malice what could be considered incompetence or otherwise. I don't think it's necessarily incompetence. It's just so ingrained. It's so normal. It's so entrenched in the way business happens. It's so part and parcel of the traditional waterfall project management Gantt chart style world that people do with it without realizing. And I think that we're starting to see a bit of a shift where people no longer resonate with that language, or at least I'm starting to see that. The way a so-called leader treats their collaborators makes a huge difference. It's treatment that matters completely. So what could we do differently? Now, I'm a firm believer, and I use this when I'm talking about my retrospectives as well, that we should have a little less conversation, a little more action. We can talk and talk and talk about how we don't like the language resources. We can talk about how it makes people feel. We can ask people how it makes them feel. But unless we do something differently, that situation won't change. And it's the same when I'm coaching teams to try new things. If they're unhappy with the state of play right now, if they're unhappy with their current environment, they have to do something differently. Otherwise, they'll probably be complaining about the same frustrations in a few weeks' time anyway. So there's a lovely little flowchart visual here, and it just says, should I say resources? Do you mean people? Yes, then say people. No. Do you mean people and things? Then say people and things. No. Do you mean things? Then say things. So yes, say things. I think it's very, very simple. Quite simply, if you mean people, say people. My encouragement to you, just as I was describing, if you hear someone refer to someone as a resource, approach it with empathy, unconditional positive regard. They are probably, that person who's doing it, they're doing so with, to the best of their ability, with the skills and knowledge they have at hand, their own experiences. You don't need to approach them with any sort of attack or anything, but just approach them with empathy and see if you can encourage them to consider using other language. And you have to start using that language yourself as well. If you are involved in a project and you're in need of a capability or a skill set, ask for it rather than saying resources. So we need a Java developer, for example, rather than saying we need a resource. If you are in a position to be able to influence it with onboarding new people, with speaking with HR and trying to make it more people focused, then I encourage you to do so. Absolutely make time for personal interaction. I think it was mentioned in the introduction to this session. We are in a very virtual world right now. We're very, very disparate. We're geographically separated, many of us, some never to return to being face-to-face again, I would imagine. And the consequence of that, particularly where there are occasions when people aren't on camera, like right now, I'm just basically looking at myself talk and I can see lots of names and some photos and things like that. It can make it easier to think of someone as just a name on a screen, an avatar rather than a person. So in your meetings make time for that personal interaction. I encourage the first 5 minutes of any session that I'm involved with to be focused on personal things, not just business talk. And that can be icebreakers. And Francisco, if you're still here, you will remember that from some of the teams that I was helping with when we worked together, with the icebreakers at the start of every session. That's to build in the time for personal interaction. It's to help with thinking of people as people, not just avatars on a screen. They're beating hearts behind a laptop that have thoughts and feelings and desires and wants and things like that. If you feel the need to, I have a little totem. If anyone's seen the film Inception, he uses this little spinning top as a way to remind him that he's real. And I, on my desk, have a tiny Groot, and it links back to my sticker, which was around here somewhere, my Guardians of Agility sticker. It's for the same purpose. My little Groot reminds me to be people focused. You could try that. And then again, I would encourage you just to be part of the change, to challenge yourself to try and make tiny changes over time. And coming back to the bottom here, we don't need to let perfect be the enemy of good. The utopian world is a far, far away. But if we were to make 1% change every day over time, that grows and grows. So if we can encourage others to think of people as people, to behave in such ways, that will grow over time and create great things. Are there any questions anyone has? Oh, I can see some things in the chat. So yeah, Francisco was just saying that those icebreaker style questions helps with relaxing the mood to make it a more fun environment, something that you want to be part of.
Feel free to unmute and ask your questions. You do not have to type them in the chat box if you don't want to.
Engage however you prefer.
Also, that the icebreaker questions helps to know each other, to know the rest of the team, because sometimes you have a lot of things in common with your teammates and you don't know, and you realize that you're very similar, or that someone has a very similar interest than you. So it really helps you to connect with other people. It's great.
Completely. And there was a really tangible example of that with the work you and I were doing, wasn't there, Francisco? So I think I introduced an icebreaker that was related to video games, and we discovered that a team that had been working together for quite a long time, there was 2 people on there that liked Zelda, Legend of Zelda, the video game, and that just allowed them to connect. That I did a similar one where 2 people figured they liked a game and they ended up arranging to play Call of Duty together later that evening, knowledge that they would have never had unless they had a conversation on a personal level. Now, again, particularly important now that we're virtually disparate and we're not quite having those coffee chats and water cooler conversations where we learn some of those things about each other. So we need to build in time for it in our work days, whether that's part and parcel of daily meetings, whether it's having a session on a Friday just for a bit of fun and learning about each other that's non-work focused. I know a lot of companies have been doing these coffee chats, these water cooler moment style sessions that are the only rule being you cannot talk about work. There's lots of ways to do it. Any further thoughts? So what we didn't get to do at the beginning of the session was use the Menti to gauge agreement or disagreement with my statement about humans not being resources. It would be great just to get a quick message in the chat, like an agree or a yes or a no. Do you agree with the statement that humans aren't resources? Yes. Do you disagree? No. I would have used Menti to gauge this, and we would have had a bit of a before and after view to see if anyone's mind had changed. I get the impression it's going to be a yes, but we shall see. And I guess the other thing I'd like to emphasize is that not everyone will agree with that point, you know, and that's okay. We're not here to try and evangelize or try and sway anyone to my way of thinking. I'm just here to facilitate the discussion, to demonstrate why I feel that the word perhaps could do with being used less in the business world. And I'm open to the debate. If anyone can convince me otherwise, I'd love to have that conversation. All right, so there hasn't been a person today that's responded with a no, which is a good sign. So my encouragement to you, give it a go. Go back to the teams you work with. Have a think about, if you hear that word, how you could approach that. Maybe stop using it yourself if you are using it. See how that lands. Ask people what they prefer to be referred to. You could try that. Final thing, I always build into any workshop, any retrospective or anything I run, an element of retrospection, inspection, adaptation. In the interest of improving this workshop, there is a space on this Miro board where you can share what you'd like to see more of, as in why not try this? If you liked things, share those in the post-it notes by dragging them to the bullseye part of this board. Would love your feedback. It is all helpful. And even if it was a terrible talk from your perspective, I have very thick skin, so I will learn from it, and it's okay. Perhaps you're not a fan of the outfit.
Chris, are you comfortable with us sharing this board outside of this group?
Absolutely. I can make a copy of the board available to you if you should so wish to share it.
Chris Nelson here. I just had a quick question, if you don't mind, while we were
Sure.
populating it. By the way, I love your costume. Thank you so much for having this session for us. I'm just a bit curious as to why you chose this topic about this label, and is there like a personal story involved, or I was just curious as to your thinking as to why you chose this topic for us.
I think it stems from me being a people-focused agile coach who works systemically with organizations to try and improve the environment they're working in, to try and create a place that they're excited to work in, that they are a valued human. And I've been part of transformations and spoken with very senior people where I have observed behavior to the contrary, where people are treated as resources, and it's not been something that I've liked to see. So it's something that I feel particularly passionate about. I have left companies feeling like a number before rather than a person. And it's led me to, I guess, to try and share my message about it. So it's a mixture of personal experience, but also just wanting to be part of the change that moves towards people being thought of as people.
Yes, Chris, thank you so much for sharing that. And I too have left companies where it was just lip service, where the priorities were different. People were being voiced, but it definitely didn't see that in reality. Thank you for saying this.
I could tell you, so I can see someone's written examples of change in organizations that people have affected. Francisco's here, and he worked with me at a previous company. We have both left this company now. And when I joined this company, one of the first things I did was just introduce something called Recognition Friday. And all that you did is, on a weekly basis, you just shared something something you were grateful for, someone that's done great work. You just recognized a few people that you thought had done good work in the past week or so. And it started off me kicking off and sharing with 3 or 4 people. And then it kept going. And then a week later, I kicked off again. And a week after that, I kicked off again. And then I went, I think the 4th week, I woke up thinking, right, time to kick that off again. And someone had already done it. And I thought, great, it's starting to take off. It just became this entrenched thing where people, they appreciated their people. They thought of people as people. And I liked that. I started doing a bit of a thing where if I heard someone being referred to as a resource in a meeting, I would do this. I would just wave on the screen. I'm like, oh, sorry. And I said, oh, I meant people in that situation. So I started seeing change over time just by doing small things, being, leading by example myself, being someone who was working with the senior leadership team to transform ways of working, by leading by example myself, by demonstrating vulnerability and by being part of the change. I was able to slowly enact things that started resulting in people being listened to. I brought in ENPS surveys to gauge what people thought. I started doing these interactive town halls where we gauge people's opinions on things and sort their ideas and things like that to allow them to be creatively part of the solution for how we could fix things, how we could make things better. So hopefully that responds a little bit to some examples of change in organizations that have affected people. To the point around you'd like more of this, tactics in startup culture where leadership isn't on board. Why teams, yet they push why teams are successful. I'm not sure I understood that entirely.
Sorry, I'm sorry, I meant why teams aren't successful.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
My response to that is, what does success mean?
Right. Mm-hmm.
The first question I often ask whenever someone's senior asks for something is, okay, what is it you're looking to achieve by doing that? They're bringing about a change. They're doing so, again, unconditional positive regard. They're doing so with the information they have available to them. They've probably got some pressure externally trying to get them to bring something about, whether it's their senior stakeholders, whether it's shareholders, something is driving them to think we need to do something. And my first response is always, okay, so what are you trying to achieve by that? And a lot of what I do as an agile coach is try and create an environment where people can be autonomous and work autonomously, but at the same time, enable the senior leadership team to feel that warm and fuzzy feeling inside that they know things are in control. And I often find it's a bit of a balancing act to try and find how we can create an environment that enables both. Right. And part of it is seeking to understand the outcome they're looking for. So in that situation, what does success mean? Okay, tell me what success means in their eyes. And it might be, oh, well, we're not getting enough of something, or they're not doing it fast enough. Okay, does fast mean good? Not always. Does fast mean value? Not necessarily. So I'd always try and question and probe a little bit deeper before responding there.
Exactly. And there's right.
Go ahead.
There's a big and to that where management, they want to do agile, but they don't believe in it. So they don't even believe in what they want to serve. And then we have some teams who understand what agile is and they're all on board, or we have team leads who don't care. They don't believe in the process. They don't care about story pointing. They don't care about team commitments. And they tend to do the work when they want to do it. And management's like, well, I don't understand what's wrong with that if they're getting the work done. And I'm like, well, technically, they're a 50% team. Yeah. But the management's like, well, they completed 94%. I'm like, they completed 94%, but they only completed 50% of what they committed to. And so it's one of these things where as Scrum Masters, we're not even considered leadership in the organization. And so it's this double-edged sword where even just on the level right now of teaching the teams before we can, even go into mentoring or into coaching, it's just teaching them what Scrum is. And because we don't have the support of the leadership, because leadership's like, I don't care as long as they get development done. But it's like, but you want us to teach Agile, but you don't support us on Agile. And so it's just like, I'm in such a situation where I'm like, okay, how do I even put that in iterative steps to teach not only leadership, but to teach my teams?
And this is why whenever I'm doing sort of transformative effort, one of the first things I'm always looking to do is get the leadership bought into the why we're doing it, right? And I want them to understand that doing Agile doesn't mean being Agile, right? Just because you're doing stand-ups and you're saying you're doing sprints doesn't make you actually responsive and agile.
Right.
So again, it's a lot of it is the outcomes that they're seeking, understanding those outcomes and demonstrating why doing and being agile can help you get to those. But yeah, educating leadership, very, very important, particularly if you've got this disconnect where leadership is saying, oh, we just want this done. And the teams are going, okay, we'll just get it done. But then they're foregoing the process as a consequence. All right, so there's a lot of good things I can see here. There's a comment here from, I think this is more for yourself, Mindy, on sharing the Zoom link before the invitation or something. Someone had a bit of confusion logging onto YouTube. You're on mute.
I'm sorry, what does it say? Can you zoom in for me for it? Sorry.
It's sharing the Zoom link for the session before or on the invitation, as they were confused and logged into YouTube. So I think they joined a live link, perhaps. I'm not sure.
Okay, usually if you do it through the Eventbrite, it usually sends it out a couple days before and an hour or two before, and it's also posted on our LinkedIn event page an hour before the event. I post it as well. So, but if you're also connected with me on LinkedIn, I can message it to you privately as well. So I will post my LinkedIn in the chat box. Just give me a minute if anybody wants to connect with me.
Good stuff. And there is a space, if you haven't already connected me on LinkedIn, you can do so here. You can learn a little bit about my website, where I share lots of content around agility, including 50+ free retro templates. You can share or you can connect with me on LinkedIn and discuss with me further if you wish to do so. And I also have a YouTube channel where I share all things agile games, including the talks I give. So yeah, if you'd like to connect with me afterwards, feel free to do so. I like that people like the Miro boards. I prefer to present in this style of way rather than just having PowerPoint slides and talking at people. I like to try and make it as interactive as possible. Again, particularly important where we're not face-to-face anymore, and it's easier to disconnect and switch off because you've been looking at a screen all day and you're getting emails and Slack messages and all that sort of thing. So I try to make it interactive. And thank you for those of you that have engaged with me today.